Reviews of Alita Battle Angel and Elizabeth Harvest. I give Alita Battle Angel a 10 out of 10. I think it's easily Robert Rodriguez's best film because he's not so good at writing. He's terrible at writing, but he's actually a very good visual director, much like Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder would have done an equally amazing job if he wasn't insisting on writing in the past. He just writes, he should not be writing. I think this is easily the best James Cameron project since Terminator 2. And like Terminator 2, it has a lot of rewatchability. Whereas something like Titanic and Avatar, I think after you've seen it once, certainly after you've seen it twice, you never visit it again. Titanic and Avatar were more manipulative in that they pulled on your heartstrings, but at the end of the day there was nothing really deep going on. They pretended to be deep, but they weren't. Alita Battle Angel, it's never contrived. It never goes in a predictable, cliche direction. I mean, sometimes it gets close to it, but it's never so much so that it's tired and you're rolling your eyes. The question of whether Alita is a Mary Sue, she is a little bit. But even if she is or was a Mary Sue, it doesn't shy away from it. It doesn't pretend to be this female empowerment making a statement. It's just what it is. It's a visual delight, the whole movie. Spoilers ahead. Spoilers of always. Yeah, it's a little bit contrived the way Alita is used for exposition, kind of the way Neo was in The Matrix. She's the main character. She lost her memory, so everybody explains to her what the world is like and how everything works. Just like Neo gets everything explained to him because he's a fish out of water too. So it's a very typical sort of adventure story. But it's not as cheesy as The Matrix was. It's done much more tactfully because, of course, James Cameron, he's got a lot more talent than the Wachowski siblings. You know, and back to the question of whether she's a Mary Sue, well, she does suffer almost the entire movie. So there's that much. In terms of her being overpowered, okay, maybe she is. But at the end of the day, I think just like plot holes or deus ex machinas, it doesn't really matter if a character is a Mary Sue. As long as the character is awesome and the visuals and the scenes are amazing, a character can be two-dimensional. Deus ex machina. You know, and the way these expositions are always delivered in these movies, you know, like Neo being introduced to the Matrix. That's almost to do Deus ex machina, the beginnings of movies, because something has to get the ball rolling, and it's usually pretty silly, right? Amnesia. I read the reviews of this movie, and a lot of the critics are saying that the characters are uninteresting and cringeworthy, and the story is too thin. But I'm thinking, how is this movie in any way more shallow than every Marvel movie, including the best of them, Endgame and Infinity War? The characters are always a little empty. There's never a deep message in these movies. It's a comic book movie. It's always about like finding your faith or learning teamwork or thinking of others instead of yourself. I feel like this movie is what Speed Racer tried to be, but failed. Despite how well done the visuals were in Speed Racer, the plot was just laughably bad and boring and predictable. Whereas this plot is good, unpredictable, entertaining, very slick. Partly due to the fact that it's a comic book that was like made in, I think, like whenever, a Japanese, Chinese, whatever comic book that's already a cult favorite. So they've already got a great story to work with, that being James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez. Oh, another thing is that much like Endgame or Infinity War, every character in this movie is likable. Also like Terminator 2. Every character is interesting and you enjoy watching them. You're not rolling your eyes when a certain character comes up and thinking, oh god, wait, can we get back to the cool part, the cool characters? Now, Alita didn't make a killing in the box office, but I really hope they make sequels, because if they had sequels, I would watch all 4 of them in one day because it was that good. Or however many they're making. And apparently James Cameron already has enough written they could easily make the sequels in terms of good writing. And Robert Rodriguez already has all the sets, I think, made, and he has all the CGI figured out. So I don't think it would cost nearly as much to make sequels. And this one didn't even cost an extreme amount of money. So I would really be disappointed if they didn't make a sequel. In my perfect world, James Cameron would scrap the Avatar sequels and just work on Alita movies for the rest of his life. Because regarding Avatar, I mean, the movie franchises run on hype. And the last Avatar movie came out 10 years ago. Nobody even remembers what it was about. Nobody even cares. I don't think anybody even cares to see sequels to Avatar. And whoever wanted sequels to Avatar, does anybody want to see further explorations by these characters or this world? I don't think there's anything. Well, we'll see, I guess. But I think he's got his work cut out for it. I think it might be a huge economic catastrophe, these Avatar movies. I can't help but think of Avatar like Pocahontas in space. And I find it cheesy, insulting to the intelligence, and it's kind of like beating you over the head with this environmental message that's obvious. Elizabeth Harvest is a movie directed by a guy who I haven't seen any of his movies. He did one movie called, I think his best known movie is called Gothica, starring Halle Berry. Interestingly, he keeps hiring Carla Gugino, so it makes me think that they're married or something. Carla Gugino played the Silk Spectre, the old Silk Spectre in Watchmen. Zack Snyder hires her in everything. She played the psychiatrist in Punch Drunk Love. She was the voice of the computer in Man of Steel, the spaceship computer. She was in the movie Gerald's Game. The main star is a model, former supermodel called Abby Lee. She's extremely easy on the eyes. She was in Mad Max. She played one of the head villains' women. She was in a movie called Neon Demon with Dakota Fanning. She's pretty good. Now, the interesting thing about this movie is that it's basically it's a modern retelling of the story of Bluebeard. The story of Bluebeard is that Bluebeard has a wife, and he tells her, you can, go anywhere you want. Here's the keys to everything on my pirate ship. And, you can have everything, all the jewels, all the alcohol, whatever. Do whatever the hell you want. I'm going out of town now. You can go anywhere you want on the ship except for this closet. You can't open the closet. Don't look in this closet. Here's the key, though. He takes off, he leaves. And she can't help it, and she opens the closet, and all of the dead bodies of Bluebeard's former ex-wives fall out. Now, an interesting psychological take on the Bluebeard story that I once heard was that the moral of the story for men is don't give a woman the key to your heart, or she's going to find all of your darkest secrets. So don't give someone the key to your soul unless you're ready for them to look at it. And the lesson for women is don't look into somebody's soul unless you're prepared to see all the dark things that are there. And I guess it doesn't necessarily be the lesson to women or to men, but it could just be two separate lessons. Now, spoilers abound. What happens in this story is, he takes off, he goes away. This is why it's so obviously Bluebeard's story of Bluebeard. She goes into the room, and she sees all these clones of herself being harvested. That's why it's called Elizabeth Harvest. He finds out that she went into the room, and he kills her. And then, a month later, she wakes up because obviously it's a new clone. And they go through the whole thing all over again. The movie's billed as a horror, sci-fi, I guess, drama. I'd call it almost an art film. It's very beautifully shot. Oh, it's also starring Ciarán Hinds, who played Julius Caesar on the show Rome, and played the what was his name? Steppenwolf in the Justice League movie. The fact that the room is filled with clones of her it's a fun take on the Bluebeard story, because instead of the dead bodies of all of his wives falling out of the closet, it's more like she's seeing all of his wives, I guess, but they're his future wives, and they're her. The movie also reminds me of a movie called Moon, starring Sam Rockwell, directed by David Bowie's son, because I guess the Bowie family at least has some talent, because David Bowie sucks. And because it's about like clones and one of the clone a person being used disposably, being disposed of, and then every time he's useless, a new clone of him wakes up and is reprogrammed. And just like that, in Elizabeth Harvest, her clone wakes up before she's disposed of. So there's two of her. It's really interesting watching Abby Lee acting in the movies because she's like a Victoria's Secret model. She's been a supermodel, catwalks, cover of Vogue magazine, and I'm just watching her walk, and she walks almost like a model. When she wears high heels, it's like, I mean, nobody's had more experience walking in high heels than a runway model. So it's just interesting to see how coordinated she is just with walking. I mean, yeah, we joke about how runway models are idiots and they don't really have any skills except walking. But, I mean, if there is a skill to walking, they certainly have it more than anybody. And she has an interesting body because I think she's like 5'10" or 5'11", skinny as hell, no breasts. Because I think, runway models, they have to be basically coat hangers. Not meaning skinny, but they have to be able to... They're there to wear the clothes. That's why I say coat hangers. And I know this has been said about a lot of movies, but as well made as this movie is, it could have just been a 20-minute Twilight Zone episode, which is why Twilight Zone is such a great show. The original, not the Jordan Peele version, of course. And it's funny how a lot of these movies, like Sucker Punch, Under the Silver Lake, and The Neon Demon, you gotta wonder, are they just an excuse to have like really attractive women in the movie? Do they just write, how am I going to get a really hot woman in this movie? I'll have to think of a plot that requires that. Because she's been naked for like 20 times throughout this movie. It's not necessary. Aside from the fact that it's really nice to look at, is what I'm saying. But it's not related to the plot that much. It reminds me of how Alfred Hitchcock always hired the same hot-looking blonde in all of his movies, or how Ingmar Bergman always married every actress in all of his movies. I don't blame them. If I was a famous director, I'd probably hire hot women for my movies so I could hit on them too. Me too. Oh, and James Cameron, he married Linda Hamilton, and then he dumped her for the blonde girl in Titanic. You know, the girl who played the daughter of... old Rose. Who else? Judd Apatow, Steven Spielberg. I mean, I guess it's a no-brainer. You're the director. They look up to you. It's a perfect opportunity. It's the perfect scenario to meet attractive women. An odd thing is that almost every character in this movie has an English accent, but the steering wheel is on the left side. So I don't really understand. That's just a little bit strange. So the movie had very good pacing for the first hour. Then they decide to tell the backstory for the next, basically half hour at least. And it reminds me of Looper, which did that the worst. Did poor pacing the worst. Where they had the last part, the climactic part of the movie, be take place on a boring farm, and this is ridiculous. They should have just done the backstory first and then led up to... We've already had the climax and now we're just getting backstory, and I just don't understand why they do that, aside from they think it's clever. The climax kind of kicks in the last 20 minutes, so that's nice, but it was a good half hour of from an hour to... The whole movie's 2 hours. So from the first hour to an hour and a half, it's like just dead air. They did this whole fucking, what do they call it? Flashback, backstory that should not have gone there. And the thing is, maybe it wouldn't have belonged at the beginning either. So maybe it should have been cut entirely then. Or, cut down to like 5 minutes instead of half an hour. Just like the movie Looper. That whole goddamn farm scene, the last 45 minutes of that movie, should have been in the first 45 minutes. Or snippets, back and forths, from past to present or future to present. I don't know, make it happen, but pacing is not, that's almost like a cardinal rule. It's almost as important as character development, if not more important. So I would give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. Alita, again, 10 out of 10 for what it was trying to do. For what this movie's trying to do, it's just like average, because you'd never watch it again, you'll never remember it. It's certainly an acting vehicle for Abby Lee. This is a very juicy role. This is a role of a lifetime for her. She gets to show off her acting abilities, and she's pretty good at it. I'm not a good judge of acting, and she gets to show a full range. She gets to play different clones of herself that act differently. So, yeah. I mean, it sure beats Paris Hilton's big breakthrough acting role in House of Wax, where she just gets killed and she plays a retard. All in all, this is like a third-rate version of the movie Moon with Sam Rockwell. Moon did this whole idea much better. Moon is like a 9 out of 10, so just watch that, is what I'd say. Or if you just want to see a really attractive, gorgeous supermodel, go on YouTube and YouTube Abby Lee, Victoria's Secret, and you can see her walking around with angel wings and whatnot. So to summarize, the first half hour of this movie is Bluebeard's Ghost, and then the next hour and a half is third-rate Moon. And I'd say the first half hour, the Bluebeard's Ghost part, was the best part. I would say in this 2-hour movie, keep the first half hour basically, keep the last half hour, trim the middle hour down to like 10 minutes, or even 20 minutes. And the movie goes from a 6.5 to like a 7.5, or even an 8. Another thing is that this movie isn't really about anything. It's just a lot of twists and turns and some fun sci-fi ideas. Whereas Moon had a main theme, which was loneliness, and it did it perfectly. Yeah, the problem is this movie throws a lot of good ideas at the wall, but doesn't really... But it's a mess. It's a mess. It doesn't know what it is. Yeah, the ending just clinches the fact that this movie doesn't know what it's doing and doesn't know where it's going, never did. And that's the problem with drama movies. You invest all this time with the hope that it's going to finally be wrapped up in a bow at the end, and it'll have an overall message, and it'll all come together, coalesce, that might be the word. And most often it doesn't. And then it's like, oh, okay, so I wasted 2 hours. I wouldn't say I wasted 2 hours with this one. It was interesting ideas, and it's always it's always good to see how a movie fails, because you can learn. But if I was looking for a deep experience, these movies don't provide them. And if I want a shallow experience, just like bullshit movies to watch, I just stick with shitty horror movies, because at least you know what you're getting, and you get all the shocks. I like the shock scares. And it is what it is. You don't expect much. And you can do the dishes, you can leave the room, you can go to the bathroom, and you haven't missed anything. You don't have to invest. And, yeah. I'm just trying to say that this movie was trying to be a profound art movie to a degree. And that's annoying. If you're not going to do it right, don't do it. And the really disappointing thing about these pretentious art movies is that, if they had spent not a little, but some, not too much more time on the story, on the plot, tying everything together, it could have been perfect. It could have been great. It wasn't necessarily that far away from it. If you support gays, click like. If you respect blacks, comment. If you think women are people too, click the notification bell. And if you care about sick children, subscribe. Final thought about Alita, Battle Angel, is that as a wannabe artist myself, who constantly feels bad about not having achieved success, not being able to make a living at it, it's not comforting, but it puts things in perspective to realize that even at the top, these people are spending tons and tons of time, often with no success, because Alita wasn't a huge success. And James Cameron worked on that for like 10 years at least. And then you think about all the time Robert Rodriguez put into it. And in a way, it didn't succeed. So that's gotta hurt. Obviously, James Cameron still has 9 lives left because he's an extraordinary success. Very lucky in my opinion. But, so he's not a great example. But think about like the Wachowskis. How much work they've put into their last few movies. How much time. And how pretty much nobody liked those movies. That's gotta hurt. And which is why I try not to spend more than a year on each book that I write. Because I don't want any one project to take up more of my time than that. And you know, a year is enough time for me to write a story that is not devoid of mistakes, but is pretty damn close to perfection in my opinion. So it's just a pretty good life.